you should not be doing bottom of funnel content if you do not have product market fit, like period.
Hey, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Content Briefly. Today we're talking to Lashay Lewis. She's the founder of Authority Plug, which is a consultancy focused on helping SaaS companies create better bottom of funnel content. That in and of itself was a really interesting part of the conversation, how she got to that point, some of the positioning and messaging work she's done to help build up her own pipeline, the processes that she's put together to help companies be successful with bottom of funnel content, how she measures it, lots of good stuff there. And in talking to a lot of SaaS companies over the last however long I've been doing this, bottom of funnel content is often forgotten. And so I really appreciate that she's thought deeply about this and come up with some great systems to help address it. Anyways, there's a whole lot there to unpack. We also talk about her LinkedIn posting, which is fantastic, and I highly recommend that you go check it out. It's a lot more than just clicks and impressions. She's actually really building her business by doing this. We also talk about her transition from working in-house to working as a consultant, which I think probably a lot of people think about or maybe aspire to, especially in today's age where the job market is so uncertain. So anyways, we cover a lot of ground here. Lashay was great. We're going to definitely have her back on because there's more to talk about. As always, I really enjoyed this episode and I think you will too. One last thing before we get into this episode, we'd encourage everyone to go check out our paid Slack community. It's $20 a month or $220 a year. You get access to 10 paid channels. There's almost 500 people that are part of that paid group now. And the conversations that are being had there are in-depth, really fascinating stuff that you absolutely will not find on Google or anywhere else. You also get transcripts to this podcast, and we have unlocked almost 5 years of this Slack group to be searched. So there's a search channel. You can go in there, ask questions, and it will query almost 900,000 messages over the course of nearly 5 years. So I would encourage folks to go check it out, superpath.co/community. Hey everybody, Jimmy from Superpath here today with Lashay Lewis. This is our first time meeting. Really excited to chat. I have 6 or 7 bullet points. I think we could fill 3 episodes with some of the topics that we're going to dive into today. Before we do all that though, Lashay, welcome. Would you mind introducing yourself to folks who aren't already familiar with you?
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name is Lashay Lewis, and I am founder of Authority Plug, a B2B content marketing consultancy for growth stage SaaS startups.
Awesome. So you've actually been in Superpath for a while. So I'm kind of familiar. I know your name, but a few months ago, I was chatting with a friend, Pat Lynch, who runs content at D2L. And we were talking about bottom of the funnel content. And he said, have you seen Lashay Lewis's LinkedIn? And I said, no, I better go check it out. And he was like, you have to. It's so good. And I did. And I'm so glad I did because you post a ton of really cool stuff there. Maybe this is a good place to start because everyone should go check out your LinkedIn. It's primarily focused on bottom of the funnel content. That's your thing. But you also create visuals for every post, which I really appreciate because from my perspective, an idea is only really a sound idea if you can draw it. You know, if that makes sense. And I feel like that really differentiates the content that you create on LinkedIn versus a lot of the other stuff I see.
Yeah, I would say that's a big differentiator as well. And especially, and I always tell people, I know if someone is smart, if they can take something complicated and simplify it, because I think one of the things that most LinkedIn people, do are tend to overcomplicate something to make them seem smarter. I don't want to say them what they are. They probably are smart, but it's they're just overcomplicating something if you just break it down and people can understand it, the more they understand, the more they want to follow you, the more people buy from you. It's just like a snowball effect. Yeah.
Did you start doing this when you launched Authority Plug?
That's a great question. So yes and no. So I really started Authority Plug back in August of 2020.
Okay.
And I had my first client, and it was only one client, but he was paying me $5K a month, something like that. And I worked with him, got him great results. He kind of fell back a little bit after a while because it's one client. They're all going to churn at some point. So fell back for a little bit, came back in September of 2022. And I was like, well, let me try LinkedIn. I've been reading a lot about it, seeing Justin Welsh's course on it and things like that. And I was like, okay, let me just try to give this a shot. I got discouraged in December of 2022 and I took a break. And I came back in January of 2023 and haven't stopped posting since then.
Nice. What was the difference? Was it Elon Musk buying Twitter? Because I feel like Twitter used to be the
Well,
spot
here's
for
the
this kind
thing.
of
Like,
thing, and then
I
everybody switched
never
over to LinkedIn
messed with
at some
Twitter
point.
like that. Like, to me, it's just, yeah, it's just not my vibe. It's like the bro energy and
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like, that's not my thing. Because one of the reasons that's not my thing, and this is a whole nother like episode about mental health and stuff like that. It's like, because I was stuck in the hustle culture for so long, and I thought that that was the way to grow a business. It was the way to scale. It was the way to do this, do that. It was like, no, like it's literally the exact opposite. So it was like that sat with me, and it was like kind of bitter about it. So I was like, F those guys. And I went over to LinkedIn, and I was like, I like it over here. It's good. I can display my expertise. And yeah, I just kind of started putting things out from there. And that's how everything kind of began.
that's awesome. Could you tell us about Authority Plug? Obviously, this is your consultancy, but like, tell us about the origin story, what kind of work you do, the customers you work with, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So the origin story of Authority Plug comes from my struggles of being an in-house content marketer. So when I was in-house, um, I worked, I worked across a couple different agencies. And one of the things I noticed was that they were hyper focused on traffic and not focused on leads. I also didn't like the vibe that agencies gave, where it was almost like smoke and mirrors reporting and like putting juniors on like senior level accounts and enterprise accounts and things like that. And I'm just like, this isn't my vibe. So had to do that for probably close to 10 years between in-house and doing across agencies.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, I wanted to work for one last agency before I started my own thing. And I didn't get the job at the agency because I didn't know how to write product-led content, right? I didn't know how to write content that converts, and it was just the knowledge gap between the two were so big. I just couldn't do it, and I didn't make the cut. But one of the founders really took me under his wing and like talked me through editing and things like that. And it was like from there, that's when I was like, okay, I have to. So my husband actually convinced me to do this. He was like, I know you want to do the entrepreneur thing, but you might need to take a step back and go in-house. And that was the best thing I could have ever did, because I went back in-house. I was at a $75K a year salary, and it was okay at first, right? Because that was the most I've ever been paid up until that point to be anything in content marketing. And that might not just be a universal thing. That might be a me thing, right? Maybe I didn't ask for the raises I should have asked for, but that was the most I had ever made up until that point, being a content marketer.
And that was that was in-house at a SaaS company or at a different agency?
No, so this was actually an affiliate company.
Okay.
So it's almost like in the advertising space, but that bottom of funnel methodology can still apply really to almost any category. So I was able to just take that methodology and take it to them and be able to get them good results. But it's like after, that 2-year mark, or coming up on that 2-year mark, and it was like there weren't any raises on the horizon or anything like that. I was like, yeah, it's probably time to like do something different. And then in September 2022, that's when I started posting, and then came back January of 2023, and then kept going so I got on the Exit 5 podcast around, I think it aired April of 2023, and I signed my first 2 clients from there.
No way. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. And that was enough for me to go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to step back from this job, because I wasn't making that much, right? Like it didn't take much for me to be like, okay, let me step back from this job and go full in on consulting.
Yeah.
And that's how it started.
That's awesome. We're actually, Dave Gerhardt is going to be on the podcast a couple episodes from now, which I'm very excited about.
What's up, Dave?
That's fantastic. So you left the job. You've been working on Authority Plug full time since then.
Yes.
Very cool. How is it going?
Amazing. So it's been crazy. it started pretty rough because I had to find my positioning. I was coming from in-house and I was like, oh my gosh, like, how do I do this? And so the trickiest part has been the positioning by far. Out of everything else, I've done sales, marketing, that positioning. So the way I went to market with this was just kind of like, at first I was saying a fractional strategist, but I found out that they don't call it that. So I can't call it that. Fractional is almost more of like starting to become more popular, but it's almost like an internal term. It's like that's
Right.
how we use it to identify what we do. So I named myself a content strategy advisor and I started putting up like, I said I was like doing bottom of funnel content and things like that. Came across two guys on LinkedIn, Anthony Pieri and Rob Kaminsky, two really, really smart product marketers. And they started helping me understand product marketing because as someone in content, I wasn't in product like that because, again, one of the problems with companies is that their teams are siloed and the communication is
Mm-hmm.
siloed. So it's like as a content marketer, I didn't get to dive into sales and into product and into all this stuff. So I was learning about product marketing from them. And I seen that they put up a visual and it was really, really good. And I'm like, oh, I understand this. Maybe I'm a visual learner. So I took one of their visuals and broke it down in a way that I could understand for content strategy. And I started putting them out, and then the audience just started growing from there. There's a next milestone, but I'll wait for you to ask me for that one. There's another one after that.
I'm fascinated to hear you say that the positioning was challenging. It makes sense though. Like many years ago, Greg Ciotti, who's one of my content marketing heroes, wrote a blog post. I think it was called "Easy Reading is Damn Hard Writing," something like that. So it's like when you read
Yeah.
something and it's like it flows and it's the writer makes it look easy, but it wasn't. And I feel like your
Yes.
positioning sounds like it maybe fits that framework because when you see the stuff you put on LinkedIn, it's like, oh, Lashay, yeah, she does bottom of funnel stuff. Like, go look at her stuff; it's really good, you know. But I can appreciate that it wasn't just like you snap your fingers and there it is. Like, here's your positioning, here's your
Yeah.
messaging.
Like it was tricky because when I came on LinkedIn, I didn't see a whole lot of people saying bottom of funnel or BoFu or anything like that. And I'm not saying I created the category or anything. Like it's been a term, but it's like nobody attached themselves to that term. And I was like, okay, so I do bottom of funnel. And I was thinking like the previous agency I worked for, they were having really good success with it. So I was like, okay, let me see if I can like go to market as a consultant doing bottom of funnel stuff. So from there, I had put out a LinkedIn post, and the post it was a content dashboard. And I was telling people like one of the biggest problems I had like as an in-house marketer was information consolidation. It was like stuff is everywhere. I got to go look at a YouTube video. I got to go in GE Docs. I got to go to this team. If I had all the information I needed consolidated, I probably would have gotten that job. And I always think about that. And it bothered me so much that I was like, you know what? I'm going to build something where it's like, it would have helped me out. You know what I mean? And I didn't know it at the time. I was just like building stuff. But it, if I had something like that when I was in house, it would have helped me out so much. Right. So I was like, okay, let me just put this up here. Because fun fact, I put the dashboard out one time and it got 3 likes. So I was like, okay, 2 or 3 months later, my audience was a little tiny bit bigger. I was like, okay, let me put this thing out again. And it got maybe like 350
Whoa.
likes, 200. Yeah. So that to me, that was my opening. So when I reached out to Dave from Exit 5, I, let him know like, hey, I would love to be on the show. I'm on your LinkedIn from time to time. I came out with this dashboard and people seem to love it. These are the problems I had as an in-house content marketer. Would love to come talk about it. And he was like, I would love to have you. And then from there, it was just like,
That's
yeah,
great. The dashboard is great too. As I was doing some research and reading your LinkedIn post before this episode, I filled out the form, got the dashboard, and I can verify it's really good. And there's so much good information in there. And yeah, it got me actually as I was doing it, I was like, we should use this because I have the same problem at Superpath. Like everything's all over the place.
mm,
Even though it's just me, it's
yeah,
hard to keep track of all of it. Um,
yeah, for sure.
what is the impact of consistent LinkedIn posting done for the business?
Everything, right? So the thing is, getting on Dave's pod was like the launch pad. It was an extremely huge launch pad, right? Because that was my first time ever doing a podcast. So it was a big launch pad for me, but there's a difference between attention and then monetizing that attention, right? So I could have gotten all the attention in the world from the podcast, but it was like, how was I going to monetize that and build something from it? So I went on the show and I'm like, let me talk about the thing that I love to talk about, the thing that I know about, which is bottom of funnel content. And I'm going on here risking, because I'm like, I'm coming up here with a contrarian opinion. Nobody talks about this. A lot of consultants are not on the show. I'm just like, they're probably gonna be like, who the hell is this girl? Right? Like, so it was intimidating. But the reaction I got from the show was just like overwhelming, to the point where Dave was like, come back on the show. We're gonna talk about it again.
Awesome.
And I've been on there like 3 more times.
Oh, no way.
Since then, on like other live webinars and stuff like that. But it was like, yeah, like that was me getting on the show talking about the thing that I do, bought the right type of attention. And then what happened was, once they seen that attention, like once they followed me on LinkedIn, they seen the visuals, which broke down exactly what I did in a way that it can understand. Because it's like, again, when you step out as a consultant, you're not just selling to one person. Like, you have a champion and then you have a person that signs the check. Like, you have to break it down. And you have to think about it like, if a content marketer took this to their VP of marketing, would their VP of marketing be able to conceptualize this? And that's how I think about things. I think that's one of the reasons why the content does so well, and that it does well with like lead flow and things like that, is because I'm simplifying nuance. Because bottom of funnel is very nuanced. It's confusing. It's why I lost what I thought at the time would have been an amazing opportunity. But now that I think about it, if I wouldn't have lost that opportunity, I wouldn't have probably come out with a dashboard. I wouldn't have done anything that I've done up to this point.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about bottom of funnel content? I mean, you've nailed the positioning, which I think is really helpful. You present it in a very like clean visual way. It's great. Actually, I want to ask you about how you make those visuals too, but is there something you think about about BoFu content that you think really resonates with content folks when they read it? Like, do they read it and be like, oh, that's why it isn't working, because we just chase keywords? Or, oh, there's this whole like unfilled category of content we've never created. Or like, oh, like we can't do this in-house because it's like too complicated and too much bureaucracy.
All of that, right? And it's almost like it's pulling a veil from over them, because it's like, and I say a veil because they can see, but it's blurry. And it's blurry because they have everybody telling them, they have the higher ups telling them, their coworkers tell, okay, we need to focus on this because it has the most traffic and it has the most volume. And they have their thoughts and opinions on it. And a lot of their thoughts and opinions are similar to mine. We need to start bottom of funnel, not go after the high traffic play. But it's like they don't have anybody to advocate for them. They don't have that voice of like, versus if they go to LinkedIn and, oh, look what Lashay says, she has X amount of followers. And you know what I mean? It's like, and again, that's not me patting myself on the back, but that's just me like being 100% real. This is what happens when people come to me. And I'm just like, wow, like the thing is about the visuals, like they make it easier for me to understand. It just happens that other people love them too. So it's like, again, the easier you can like get something across to someone, the easier it's going to be for them to say, okay, I want this. And it's like with them, I'm just saying everything that they've been thinking. That's it.
But
like,
you give them
bottom
the
of
words.
funnel. Yes. Like bottom of funnel does work. It does convert. You cannot source the information from Google. Like, I'm just really validating everything they probably already know.
That's so just takeaway for listeners. I'm going to oversimplify this, but what you're describing to me is the perfect thought leadership strategy, where it's like you have to give people the words to say the thing that they kind of get. You give them the words, that gives you then the ownership of that category or topic. So I feel like there's a lot to take away from that.
And that's the thing. Like, no, you're, and that's the thing. It's like the word ownership is a little bit like, ugh, but it's so true, right? It's like every time it's like people come to me, they're like, when you hear bottom of funnel, who do you think
I guess
of? You know
association
what
is
I
a better
mean?
word than ownership. Like,
Yeah. But I love, but you're totally spot on. It's like, and now I'm starting to see like more and more people with the bottom of funnel thing, but it's like, and that's okay. But it's like, I would still say like work through that positioning because it wasn't an overnight, like,
yeah,
oh, I'm just going to put BoFu in my headline. And it took a lot of like iteration and twisting and turning and things like that. And then also to build a system in conjunction with what I'm teaching. So I guess we didn't get to that part yet, but I actually advise companies in that dashboard.
got it. Meaning they get the dashboard, you provide the dashboard, and then that becomes
Yep.
kind of like the basis for how you work together. Like you run through the various steps, the customer research, the positioning, the content
Yes.
creation, et cetera.
Yep.
Very cool. How do you create the visuals? And I'm curious because I'm into visuals and I don't do it as much anymore. But back when I was
Yeah.
writing for the animals blog, we always tried to have a visual in every piece, kind of for the same reason
Mm.
as you. It's like by the time I've thought through it and feel like I understand it, I can kind of sketch out this thing, and then that makes it easier for someone to understand. Not to mention, it's better to share on social and things like that. So, like,
Yeah.
not only like what tools do you use, but like how do you go about the process of kind of taking an idea and then iterating on it, kind of probably beating it up a little bit to get it to that point?
That's a great question. So I was bouncing between two tools for the visuals. So at first I was using Miro or
Oh yeah,
Miro. I was using that at first. And then actually I was using Figma first. And then I switched over to Miro. And then I switched back to Figma. So the visuals that I've been putting out lately have been on Figma. And the way I do it, it's tricky because it's like, and I always tell people this that ask me for courses and stuff because I'm like, it's hard for me to like put my thoughts not in a box, but like articulate my thoughts because it's really just like a long stream of
yeah.
consciousness a lot of the time. So the how I do it is I start like thinking about the process in my head first. I'm like, okay, how would I approach this? And then I just try to start drawing out visually. And sometimes I just let my mind kind of wander with it a little bit and not be so like, okay, this has to look like this. So I think about how I would conduct a strategy. Like, so for example, if I'm coming into a SaaS company and we're looking at the strategy from like a 10,000 foot view, there's a couple different ways we could break it down, right? We could break it down by use case. We could break it down by product. We could break it down by industry segment. So when I think about it like that, so what I'll do is I'll go into Figma and start drawing like a board and separate it out by like use case and ICP and things like that. And it's like, even the way I do my consulting is very similar. It has a visual element to it. So the first dashboard that I give to everybody, that's not the version that's out. Well, that's not the version that I'm using to consult clients.
Got
And
it.
so that V1 has grown into a V2 that's a little bit more productized. And it's very similar to what I use in my clients. Like, it's very visual. And I think that sometimes I'm in a slump, right? Like, I don't always have like millions of visuals just like lined up. But I think like when I start working with clients like on the consulting end and I do like, oh, that was good. And then I'll just open Figma and just start to visualize out, okay, how did I do this? Because sometimes it's not always like I got to go in the brain bank and get it. It's like I got to do the thing and
Yeah,
then come back and document how I did it. I just documented visually versus like writing it down because I'm a visual learner. But it's like, do the thing, learn the thing, and then teach it. So it's like, but you're doing it in a visual way. And that's the part that's like tricky. But again, for me, I just think about how I do it. And then I just try to like put shapes and things with that. And I say shapes because that's what my visuals are. It's squares and cubes and all this other stuff. But it's like, again, even with the cube visual I put out the other day, it's like when I think about content strategy, it's like different segments. I'm like, okay, what if I just put those different segments into a cube? One side of the cube is ICP, the other one is buyer support. You know
yeah.
what I mean? So it's like you'll get better with it. It's just about repetition. Like as you keep doing it, as you keep getting your thoughts down, you're going to get really, really good. If somebody wants to go back and look at the first carousel I ever did compared to the last carousel I did, you're going to be like, holy smokes.
Yeah. The BoFu cubes piece was really good. And I can as you're describing this, I can imagine there's all this thought and experience and stuff that goes into getting it to the point where, okay, now it's this simple concept. Here's a visual. That now makes it easy to get it out to people, right? And then I can totally see how, a champion in a company brings it to their team and says, we need BoFu cubes. This is the thing that ties together all these challenges we've had. Then you get in there and it's like all the work that got you to that point, you now open back up. Like you've already thought through. So there's like, as you create it, you're sort of building the frameworks, thinking through the customer problems, and then you kind of like unpack it again once you're on the customer side. That's kind of how I imagine it anyways.
That's exactly how I do it, right? So if I'm consulting clients and I'm consulting them in this dashboard and it's in Notion right now and stuff like that, it's like I'm building things into it that they tell me they need. Not everything, right? But if they're like, okay, we need a workboard here or this looks, I'll build that into it. To me, that's like beginning stages of like product development. That's how I look at it. So it's almost like I'm doing consulting within this dashboard, but I'm also simultaneous, like kind of building a product in the background.
Oh, cool.
So it's like, yeah. So I think having them in there is helpful for me because it keeps my scope within that dashboard. So it's like, if they're like, oh, Lashay, we need help with webinars and this and then, I'm like, no, I do this here, just the bottom of funnel stuff, right? So I think for any consultants, I would say like getting your clients in a workspace is going to be super, super important. Not just to let them know your scope of work, but to also not have to be on a ton of calls either, right? So a lot of my advising with clients is a sync. And it's just me walking them through, okay, here's how we do this, here's how we do that. So I'm not on a lot of calls, right? So, and again, this is just my positioning against agencies, like the heavy meeting environment and things like that. I'm just like, I want to position against everything I did not like when I was in-house.
That's awesome. I saw that you posted recently about productizing the service, which that did stand out to me because in order to productize a service, it has to be fairly narrow, meaning kind of exactly what you just said. You can't get in there and then be like, oh, we'll do this and we'll do some of that and sprinkle this. You can't do that because then you're right. You're on calls. You're like, it becomes this whole other thing.
Yes.
So I found that to be super interesting that like, you've got this thing, it's working. It actually reminds me a bit of, I don't know if you follow Joel Kletke at all, who created Case Study Buddy. He's kind of like the Lashay Lewis of case studies, That's
crazy. I recognize the name of the company before I recognize his name.
It works then.
Wild. But yes, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, very cool. How technical are you? Are you like an automation whiz? Like, how do you think about building the processes and tools and all that to kind of make all this work smoothly?
That's a great question. So I am not technical. I don't even like technical SEO. Like, I stay away from it. But how I thought about this was, I'm like, okay, I need a repeatable system to be able to take people through. So I'm like, how can I, because again, so just to let everybody know, and I'm just being dead honest, like I'm kind of lazy. Like I don't want to, I've been in content for 15 years. Like I'm tired at this point. So I'm like, okay, how can I give my clients the most amount of value with the least amount of work? And I'm like, okay, let me build this for them and let me like advise them through it. And then like from there, I started noticing like, okay, they're running into the same issues here. There's a snag there. Let's fix this. I'm like, okay. Now, when I hooked up with someone in ops, that's when everything changed. It was like, okay, because an ops professional can take your process out of your head and put it down on paper and like get a system going with it. So once I, let him in and I let him start seeing like, okay, here's what I do first, second, third, fourth. It's just about building a system around that. So every client goes through the same thing over and over and over.
That's all. So you actually brought someone in to help you with thinking through the process, documentation.
I did. So here's the thing. And I would say this for any other aspiring consultants. I brought in a closer too early. So what happened was I got some traction from the show and like my cal was booked and I'm like, oh, this is stressing me out. But the problem was it was either companies that were too big and the sales cycle was going to be extremely too long, or it was companies that were too small, founders that didn't have the money. And again, this ties back to a positioning issue. It's like when you target, and I'm probably cutting months for somebody that's going to take this and run with it. But if you target CMOs, you're going to get the bigger companies, longer sales cycles, messy internals.
Oh, interesting.
If you target too far beginnerish, like founder, they're not going to have the money. They're not going to have product market fit. It's just not going to be good. Right in the middle is like seed, series A, series B, like in that range. Cause it's like they're not too big to the point where you can't talk to the sales team and the product team and you guys come together, but they're not small enough where it's like they don't have 5, 6, whatever $1,000 a month to pay you. Right. So that's something I would say too, like just be very cognizant of who you want to work with and how much money you're trying to get, because the companies I work with are funded. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, and that was another reason for me moving from e-com to B2B. I'm like, it's just so much money in B2B. It's just so boring. I don't know how I'm going to do it. But you just add a little bit of spice to it, you know, make it fun, make it exciting. And I think that's another thing too. It's like a lot of people say the same stuff over and over and it's so boring. And it's just like, add some spice to it, you know, bring some fun to it. You know what I mean? So I've got some stuff in the works as relates to that. But I would say, yeah, it's like, I've just take them through the same thing every single time. And once you do that, you start to see the holes in the process. And then when you fill those up, you're like, shoot, I'm probably building a product.
That's
here.
really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Without giving away your secret sauce, like what do you see? What are these companies experiencing with bottom of funnel content? Like what prompts them? Like when do they have the moment of like, we need this, you know? And then once you get in, like, is there like a couple things you find like an overinvestment in top of funnel stuff or like lack of alignment on teams or, you know, like what prevents them from tackling the bottom of funnel problem?
Yeah. So the thing I probably hear the most on sales calls is we've been focusing on top of funnel, but we're not seeing any leads. And we had this one article that was doing well, but we don't know why. And I tried this thing where I wrote around a keyword that had like 10 searches a month and we're getting demos from it. And that's like what I hear the most. The problems that they have is that the internal teams are not communicating with one another. So it's like marketing doesn't know what's going on with sales. Sales doesn't know what's going on with product. It's like, and what the dashboard solves is that it consolidates that information so we can get clear on messaging and positioning before we even touch bottom of funnel content. Because, and here's another thing I haven't said, I haven't put a LinkedIn post up about it yet, but you should not be doing bottom of funnel content if you do not have product market fit, like period. And this is just from me being in-house across agencies, like consulting, like don't do bottom of funnel. You need to have your product market fit first. So for anybody that's, you know, wanting to do the consulting thing, like for example, you can really take any part of the funnel you want and build a consultancy around it. So like if you wanted a consultancy around top of funnel, you know what I mean? I just chose bottom of funnel because that's my thing and it's really tricky to nail. And I'm like, I know if I can nail this, number one, I'm going to be a goat. And then number two, I'm going to make a lot of money.
Well,
so I was like, okay, let me dive in here, but no, it's not easy. Like it's complicated, it's nuanced, but I'm like, the clients give me that feedback loop. And Dave Gerhardt talks about this all the time with his community. He's like, the most undervalued part is the feedback loop. And that's what the clients give to me. The thing is sitting on top of Notion right now, for now, but it's like, they're telling me what they want in it. Like, okay, I want a workboard here. Can we do this? Can the templates? So it's like, they're telling me what product they want. I'm just building what they want.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I think your timing here is really good too, because, and I would imagine it's probably part of your positioning. It's like the prevailing winds of SEO are pushing us in a new direction, you know? Top of funnel, I don't know. Like, I don't know what top of funnel looks like 12 months from now. I really don't. And there's like generative AI is a factor now. It's like, and I would imagine a lot of companies are like, okay, there's a lot of uncertainty with our top of funnel stuff. we need customers though, right? So like, what could we do with our existing traffic or our existing email list? And like, where does bottom of funnel content fit in? Because that's like much more kind of safe from the
Yeah.
SEO fluctuations, AI, et cetera.
Oh, for sure. Not just that though, but another thing is the ROI on bottom of funnel content is so ridiculously larger than other things. It's like, and that's why I tell companies, I'm like, you don't have to do 50 pieces a month. This is not top of funnel. We're not going for an engagement, volume, click, impression play. We're going for a conversion play. So we need to slow down and really nail this positioning in this piece, talk about the features and do the feature mapping and all this stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, I mean, just that's the tricky part for them. And that's the gap that I feel. But I want to wait until you ask, but there's a gap I've seen in the market with bottom of funnel for years now. So since I've started working on it, I'm like, again, going back to the software thing, I'm like, if I can fill this gap, oh, game over.
That's so cool. I really appreciate that you've built a business that focuses on things you like to do, avoids the things you don't like to do, and that makes it really easy for you to prove the value of the work. Like content reporting is a disaster. You know, like this comes up in the Slack community all the time. It's like, well, what metrics do you measure, and like what tools do you use, and like how do you prove it to the CMO, which like you can't really usually. But you're right, that bottom of the funnel kind of is different because it's focused on conversion. I would imagine, I've never gone like super deep down this rabbit hole, but I would imagine it's a lot easier to attribute the creation of bottom of funnel content and the strategy behind it to customers and dollars.
Oh, 100%. And the reason it is because it's the closest conversion point, right? It's like if you write a top of funnel piece and let's say somebody hits it and they download your white paper or whatever, you have to follow that person for probably 3 to 6 months, however long your sales cycle is, especially if we're dealing with enterprise products. Like you're going to have to try to track that person across what podcast they listen to. Because here's another thing. It's like people scream like, oh, the funnel's dead. And I'm like, okay. It's not that the buying cycle is that linear. It's that's how we conceptualize buckets to put people in based on where they are mentally in the buyer's journey, right? So it's like bottom of funnel, they are mentally ready to make a decision. Now they're just trying to compare you and a different competitor to see who's the best. And it's like, best is subjective. And I get this all the time. It's like people are like, oh, well, we're not the best. Well, what if we talk about this? I'm like, best is a subjective term. If you think you're the best, make your case why you're the best. You know what I mean? It's like you don't have to shade anybody else. You don't have to talk down on another competitor. You just talk about what you do really well. So, and I'm probably spilling too much, Jimmy, but to give you an example, right? If there was a software that helped teams create bottom of funnel content, if I were to do a comparison page on that, I wouldn't trash Jasper, right? Like I would say, here's what Jasper does, and here's what this does, right? So it's like in the people that need bottom of funnel will go with this one. The people that need more of like a volume, high, top of funnel play will go with Jasper, right? And it's almost a method of self-selection on the prospect's end, because if you let them know what what you have to offer, they're going to make the decision like, okay, this is for me or this is not for me. You're just filtering. Articles are literally just a filter for sales. It's like the person reads it. They're like, ooh, this is great. Ooh, this sucks. You know what I mean? It's like, if it is good, they get to sales. They're already pre-warmed up.
That makes total sense.
Yep.
You teased a gap that you found in bottom of funnel. Do you want to talk about it?
We could talk about it.
It's okay. If you don't want to, it's okay.
No. We could talk about it. So the gap I've seen in the content marketing industry in general is that all of the AIs out right now are great at writing top of funnel, maybe even some middle of funnel content, right? Because what AI does is it pulls information from other places on the internet and brings it together and it writes you an article. The problem with AI is that it doesn't know your customer. It doesn't know your audience segments, their habits, their whatever. So when you try to write a bottom of funnel piece in Jasper or in any other tool, it doesn't come out with the subjectivity that you would want it to come out with, because they're pulling information from Google, and your company's most important information is not found in Google. It's found within your organization, right? So that's the gap I'm seeing right now. It's just like AI can't write bottom of funnel content how it needs to be written. It doesn't understand the nuances and things like that. So that's an open.
I love that. You're totally right. Actually, one of the things we tried to sell at Animals, I think I even wrote a blog post on this idea, kind of a related idea, something like unlocking internal expertise is like a great way to create more content. Something big, but just exactly what you said. It's like all the good stuff. It's in someone's notes in a PowerPoint. But it's not easily indexable. So that's good. I like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you write at all? Because I imagine like you go through this process with a customer, then there's a bunch of content that has to be written. Do you do it? Do you have a team that does it? Do you refer that stuff out to someone else, or do they do it in-house?
That's a great question. So I don't write anything. I've always hated writing. I think I'm a terrible writer. So their team writes. And the reason I like it like that most of the time is because usually they have journalists on the team. And it's like journalists are some of the best writers you will find. And I was kind of jealous. I didn't have any journalism experience, because I was like, damn, if I did, maybe if I had like that journalism experience with that strategy, I would have been like totally unstoppable. Right. But I had the strategy with no like journalism, and the people in-house have the journalism with no strategy. So it's like when you combine those two together, you get really, really good bottom of funnel content, because it's almost like journalistic style writing. It's like you go to the SME on the product team and you're like, okay, what does this feature do? How does it do it? How does it accomplish like the job to be done? It's almost like you're interviewing your subject matter experts. That's where the journalism piece comes in. And journalists, people like writers with journalism as a background, just tend to be more factual with their writing. There's less fluff. And I'm like, I realized like 2 years ago, like journalists are some of the best writers to work with. So if there's anybody in the community, and I'm sure there is, that is a journalist, there's a clear opening for you to get in somewhere and probably be able to make some pretty good money. It's just, you probably need to dive in on the strategy part a little bit. But honestly, to me, the journalism part is harder than the strategy part. I'm not even going to lie to you. And again, that's probably just how I feel about it. But it's like, writing is just so tricky for me. I just can't. So I like to pair with other people. But what I do is like I use frameworks for them. So over doing this for 15 years, I found maybe, oh boy, I don't even know how many frameworks I have now, but I'm advising on 5 frameworks as of now. And I even have 2 included in the free dashboard. So I advise on those frameworks, and I just teach them how to fill those in based on their benefits, their products, their features, the pain points, and really, again, just teaching them like about that messaging and positioning. And like, that's how I advise them. I don't write anything.
I think you're doing it right. Writing, well, you can't run a productized service that includes much, if any, writing, because writing it's slow. It's time intensive. Yeah. You have to have an editor. You go back and forth.
Yeah, it's like the tone of voice thing. It's like too many. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but it was like, I feel that. It's like, oh, the tone of voice, and oh, this, and oh, that. I'm like, nope, we're not even doing that. That's all your thing. All you need to do is make sure you get these points into the piece. It can stay your voice, your style. Just make sure you talk about these core components.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Lashay, there's so much, like we could probably go on for another like 2 hours. I would love to have you back if you're open to it. I just feel like there's so much to talk about here.
Yes.
I would really encourage people listening to go check out your LinkedIn, and I'll put a link in the show notes to make that easy. And also Authority Plug, which is authorityplug.com, right?
Yes. Yep. authorityplug.com, or you can go to authorityplug.com/content-dashboard. If you want to grab the dashboard, it's totally free. I think the cool thing about the dashboard that I can say now, that it will be a public version of V1 of the software that comes out later on.
I love it.
you guys get to see it built in public.
That's so cool. And like I said, I checked it out earlier. It is very good. Absolutely worth checking out. Lashay, seriously, thank you so much. It's wonderful to meet you. And I hope we can make this a regular thing.
Of course, I would love to come back. If the community would like to have me, I would love to be here.
I think they will. Awesome. Well, thanks again and take care.